Well, hello everybody. I'm Eleanor Mills, the founder of Noon, and I'm delighted to have with us today Lisa Unwin, who is our careers expert on Noon. And you are extremely welcome to this special masterclass, which is all about how to get yourself from where you are now, which maybe you've taken a bit of a career gap, career break, you've been bringing up some kids, or maybe you've left a job and you don't know quite what to do next, or you just fancy a change, which is all completely understandable and fine. And we are here with, I think, probably the best person in the world to advise you on at this particular juncture, who is Lisa Unwin, who's our incredible careers expert on Noon. And what is amazing about Lisa is that she has been doing this for years. She has walked this path herself. She'll tell you all about it, but she has also come back from a long career break and reset herself up, helping women back into work. Lisa and I have been fellow travellers on this for a really long time. We used to work together when I was at the Sunday Times. We met years ago through somebody who also worked for News UK, and Lisa has written for me a lot, and I used to quote her in my columns and all those kinds of things on how what I see as I ran a piece on the Sunday Times years ago which is called The Forgotten Army, which is all about all the women who'd stepped out of their jobs for whatever reason and hadn't gone back. It was one of the most successful articles I ever ran on the Sunday Times magazine because it touched so many nerves. And Lisa was absolutely a part of that then. She had something called She's Back and did a brilliant book about it. And so when I set up Noon, Lisa was absolutely top of my list on people to advise women on how to get back into their careers and their jobs after a bit of a break. So I've just been waffling on a bit while we let everybody into the masterclass, but don't worry, I will get out of the way and let Lisa take over. So first of all, just a massively big welcome to you all. Thanks for signing up. I hope this is going to be really helpful. In fact, I know it will be. And for those of you who are listening afterwards on Zoom, I really hope that you enjoy this, and we'll give you some links at the end to sign up to Lisa's course. So Lisa, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. And I love the name of Noon because I love that strapline in particular because there's so much more to come. And this quote at the bottom was, it's not a quote that from me, it's from someone who participated in some research I did when I first set up She's Back, which was all about trying to shine a light on the potential of women like me and like this lady who'd taken a career break, but was now looking ahead at the next 20 years and thinking, what do I do? And she filled in this questionnaire and then she wrote that quote, I'm 42, my kids are 10 and 12. That gives me 20 years ahead to make a discernible difference. And I thought that is so true. What she went on to tell me was how difficult it was proving to try and get her career back on track. And that's why I set up She's Back. Let me just tell you a little bit about my story. So I graduated in a long time ago, 1988-ish, and I joined Arthur Andersen at the time, which was one of the big accounting firms, and I was determined that my ambition was to become a partner in Arthur Andersen. And I joined audit, I moved into management consulting, and true enough, I achieved my lifetime ambition of becoming partner. I think I was 34 at the time. And then Enron happened. You might not remember that, but essentially this accounting scandal in the US meant that the whole firm collapsed. So there am I, 35, 36 by this time, having achieved my goal of being partner. I was now a mum. I was actually on maternity leave. The whole firm I worked for collapsed, and we went across to Deloitte. We were bought by Deloitte. Because I was on maternity leave, I had no fees against my name. So they didn't offer me partnership. I went across as a director, but they let me work part-time. So I took it on the chin, and I continued and I worked really hard, had another child, became director of brand and communication, and was expecting to get promoted back up to partner 3 or 4 years later. And in one particular week, my nanny who'd helped me look after my 2 kids resigned. She was moving out of London. I realized my children were about to both be in full-time school, and the firm told me they weren't making me a partner after all. And I just thought, well, I won't tell you what I think. I thought, but suffice to say, I flounced out of that job, thinking, well, I will look after the children myself, and they will be at a loss without me. Well, of course, they weren't at a loss without me because no one's irreplaceable. But I did spend the next 6 years being a full-time mum. I volunteered as a magistrate. I did other things. I didn't sit on my backside all day, obviously. But nobody told me when I flounced out of that job that my children wouldn't be 4 and 6 forever. And I looked up one day, I was listening to the BBC Woman's Hour, and it was the Power List. And I was probably making bolognese sauce or cupcakes, honestly. And I just thought, hang on a minute, what's happened to my career? What am I going to do with the 20 years ahead of me? And I realised that my daughter wasn't a toddler anymore. Neither was she, the one at the bottom of that slide. She was 11, she was 12. She was going to senior school. Her brother was not far behind her. And I looked around at the women at the school gates that I knew, and they were all in the same position. They were account executives, bankers, lawyers, you name it, all sorts of professions, but lots of women who had stepped back from successful careers to focus on bringing up their children. Maybe they'd got part-time jobs, maybe they weren't working at all, but all of them were sort of thinking, what am I going to do next? How do I get back? And all of them were struggling and limiting themselves, actually. They weren't thinking, how do I deploy my skills as a lawyer and become a successful lawyer again? They were thinking, how can I get a part-time job that I can do between 10 and 2, 5 days a week? Because that is my frame of how life works. And at the time, I set up a company called She's Back to shine a light on this potential and really make a bit of noise about this being a problem. What I never did was figure out how that business was ever going to make any money. And so 3 or 4 years later, I was still sort of campaigning and getting frustrated that we weren't getting any. We were starting to make progress. But I then set up a company called the Reignite Academy, which is a specialist recruitment company, which we focus on helping lawyers return to work. But all of the principles I use come from all of those years of working in She's Back, when I found out what the barriers were and how to help people get their careers back on track. So what I'm going to cover today is, I'll talk about the shape of women's careers and why we need to play the long game, why that's good news for us. And I'll talk you through some strategies and tactics that I know will work to help you get your career back on track. Essentially what I'm doing in the next hour, I'm compressing this 5-week course into about 50 minutes. So I'm trying to pull out the best bits for you, but what the 5-week course does is it touches on a lot of the more detailed activity that go behind some of these steps. So what I'll talk about is you as a brand. I'll talk to you about how the recruitment market works. And we were having a bit of a natter before this started about some of the ins and outs of that, and how you don't realize what you're up against, and how the barriers that are put up there that you need to figure out how to get around, or you need an alternative strategy in place. I'll talk to you about the value of your network, and you really genuinely will be surprised how many people you know who could actually help you. And then I'll go into some practicalities of do's and don'ts for your CV, give you an overview of LinkedIn, take some questions, and then I'll give you an overview of the course that starts in a couple of weeks' time. Right, so overview of the shape of women's careers. They're not like that, sadly. When I graduated, and I think this is common to a lot of women, I thought this was going to be me. I thought I was going to join somewhere at 22 and I would have this wonderful upward career trajectory, and I'd probably retire very wealthy, very happy, ready to enjoy my retirement at about 52, 53, and I'd sail off into the sunset. And having children would not make an ounce of difference to me and my upward trajectory, because I was smart and I was ambitious and I was just as good as the men behind me. And I know so many women who start off thinking like that, and actually that, sadly, isn't quite how things pan out. This book, by the way, is by...
Lisa, I just want to jump in there, because I think it's really important, given that a third of women on Noon, a third of university educated women of 50 don't have children. Yeah. And I just want to make it really clear to anyone watching that this is just as applicable if you've taken a career break for other reasons, or you've had burnout, or you had illness or something which stepped you away from your career. This is absolutely not just about kind of women who've stepped out for childcare reasons.
That happened to be my story, but it's not everybody's story, and certainly the women I meet have done all sorts of different things. But this book is by Aviva Wittenberg-Cox, and I love this book because it's got about 60 words in it, but the diagrams she uses are just superb. And she's sort of saying this doesn't work for a lot of women. Actually, it doesn't work for a lot of men now either, because lives are changing, technology is changing, jobs are changing. This idea of an up or out career just doesn't work anymore.
Aviva Wittenberg-Cox came on our very first Noon retreat, is a great friend of Noon's and really interested in what we're doing, and wrote an amazing article about us and the site and our whole project on Forbes magazine, which you can find on the Noon website. I'm just going to say at that point, Aviva, amazing thinker on all this midlife transition stuff.
She's great. And she breaks women's careers down into 4 phases. And again, this might be a bit of an over simplification, but it's certainly something I've seen. So many women start in their 20s, lots of ambition, think they're on a career track that's right for them, but then suddenly in their 30s get some sort of culture shock. They've chosen the wrong career path. They want to relocate. They decide to do something completely different. They're having to juggle children. They might have, the woman I'm working with at the moment, her parents were both ill at the very same time. So suddenly they start, the career that they chose isn't just working for them and their lives. So there's some sort of culture shock and change that they have to overcome. But they tend to, once having overcome that, they sort of then wake up in their 40s thinking, right, okay, here I am, that's all sorted. I'm ready to get back on track now, or I'm ready to return and be more active in the workplace, but in a different way. And suddenly there's all these barriers because the recruitment world still expects everybody to be on a straight line trajectory. And they're not ready for people whose CVs don't quite follow a straight line. And so they're not tapping into the potential of us in our 40s, and then ultimately in our 50s, if we can get back on track, then 50s are a real period where people can achieve this self-actualization, but only if we can get that work back in our 40s, if indeed work is what we want. And what I found, as I mentioned, was that the recruitment market isn't really set up to help. So I set out to try and find out what we could do for ourselves. And my book, She's Back, Your Guide to Returning to Work, does exactly that. It sort of says, it explains why the recruitment market doesn't work, and then says, right, given that's not going to work, what are you going to do instead? And I've broken this down into 5 steps, and I'll cover 4 of these 5 steps today in this session. I've said that the first step is around building your brand, but actually what I found when I was talking to people was that that's actually step 2. Because step 1 is about getting your head in the right space and starting to challenge some of the stories that might be going on in your head around the situation you're in, which could be, I'm too old, I've left it too late, the technology's moved on, I won't fit in anyway, this isn't for me. And those negative stories, I call them mental models. They're not true. They're just assumptions that we make, and we find information and data to reinforce that view if we're not careful. And so one of the things, in fact, I worked with a teacher who she'd been out for 10 years, and I asked her what made her decide it was time to go back. And she said, to be honest with you, I think I was ready to go back 3 years before I actually did, but I kept telling myself that the family wouldn't cope without me. And I couldn't be the teacher I used to be, because unless those things were true, then what had I been doing for the last 8 years? And what was the point of me? And her biggest fear was that she wouldn't be the teacher she used to be. And actually when she went, and by that she meant she couldn't be there at 7 o'clock in the morning before the caretaker and switching the lights off with him at 7 o'clock at night, because she'd got other things going on in her life. And she was right about that. When she went back, she wasn't the teacher she used to be. She was different though, and she was better, because one of her roles was looking after special needs education at the school, and having brought up 2 children with special needs, she was so much more able to advise parents and help them navigate some of the challenges that they were facing because of her own experience. So you might not ever be what you used to be. You'll be different. You'll be, and in many ways, you'll be better. So that said, the first thing to do is a lot of that mental models around getting your head in the right space and thinking positively about the future. So assuming we've all done that, then the first step is to build your brand. Now, a lot of people cringe when I talk to them about becoming a brand and thinking themselves as a brand. But the way I would put it is think about this as your brand. Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So at some point, someone is going to mention that they know you, and they will talk about you and what you do and who you are. That's your brand. So like it or not, you have got a brand, because people will describe you in a certain way. And what we need to do, if we're thinking about getting our careers back on track, is think about, what do we want that to be? And that's really hard. And this is one of the toughest things. And actually, although this is the first thing we cover in the course, this is something that runs through the 5 weeks, because it's not easy to nail in half an hour or even an hour or even a day. but there are tools you can use and there are exercises you can do to help you with that. But just to bring that to life in an example and show you some of the tools and techniques that we get people to think about what it is and what it isn't. So when I'm working with people, often they come to me with a description of themselves that looks like something on the left. The most common one, especially when I started She's Back, was I'm a mum with 2 kids. Sometimes they'd tell me how old their kids were. Sometimes I get their names as well. I'm looking for a part-time job. Now, I have never, ever seen a job advert which says, what we would like is a mum with 2 kids who would like a part-time job, right? So that's not helpful. Another common approach is someone might come and say, I'm Hannah, I used to be, and this is an example I'll talk about, I used to be a city lawyer. I've got a very needy 11-year-old. So again, sort of thinking out, I used the 2 parts about that. One is the description of might be very needy 11-year-old, or a parent who needs some support, or my husband's got a very demanding job and I need to be around to run the home, blah, blah, blah. But the other bit is the used to be. I used to be. As though that's all in the past and none of that experience is going to be there in the future. And then the other piece, the other common thing, this is probably even more common, is people come to me and say, I was account manager at an advertising agency, but I really want to do something more meaningful. I'm really interested in climate change. Or in fact, I've got somebody today who's a doctor, who's, I'm a doctor, but I really want to do something completely different. I'm thinking of becoming a lawyer. Okay, right, where do we start with that? Now, there's nothing wrong with all of those. They're completely fine in terms of how you feel and where you're beginning and what your thought process is like. But when we're thinking about becoming you as a brand, what we need to get to is something more compelling that is more aligned to what an employer might be looking for. So, for example, and what we need to do is get you to have an elevator pitch, a walking up the stairs pitch, and a walk around the park pitch. So like a very, very short description, a slightly longer description, and then a really meaningful description of what you are and what your brand is. So the elevator pitch here could be, I'm an international development economist with 15 years experience with an interest in XXX, or an experienced marketeer with extensive knowledge of financial services looking to da 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 da. Commercial lawyer with 15 years experience looking for an opportunity too. So it's about giving people some information about your skill set, your knowledge, your experience, what you're interested in, and what you're looking to do. And that, if you think about it, when we come on to CVs and your LinkedIn profile, that's your headline. And that's the bit that needs to be really consistent around everything that you do. But so that's why it runs through the whole of the course, because we need to really hone that. And you might need 2 or 3 different tweaks of it, but it's about thinking about you as a brand, because then we need to think about product placement. You know, where are people looking for people with skills like you? Where are we going to place you? What's your price? What's your value? And to give you an example, one of the tools we use to help people think this through is, I don't know how to pronounce this. I think it's ikigai, but anyway, it's a Japanese concept meaning reason for being. And I know a lot of coaches, I'm not a coach, by the way. I'm not a trained coach, but I do know a lot of coaches talk about helping people find their purpose. Now, the only slight bugbear I have with that is that that's fine. I had a great purpose when I was running She's Back. I was really passionate about helping women fulfill their potential. And I was beginning to know a lot more about it. I knew about it, and I knew the world needed this problem to be fixed. What I had never figured out, though, was how I could earn any money at that. Now, most of us are not in a position where we can concentrate on what we love, what we're good at, and what the world needs, and what the world needs, without also thinking about how I'm going to get paid for this. As an aside, another big bugbear of mine personally is that we as women haven't saved enough for our financial futures, and we really need to take that more seriously. But that's a different question. But some of the exercises we take people through is helping them think about all of those circles. So let's think about, what do you love? What are you passionate about? What do you really care about? I've got someone at the moment who's she's really interested in climate change. No experience of climate change, but we'll come back to that. What are you good at? What experience have you had? What industries do you know about? What sectors do you know about? What technical skills have you got? Where is there a demand? What does the world need fixing? Where's your vocation? And then yellow circle. What is somebody going to pay for, and how much are they going to pay? And let's position you to not just get the job you want, but get the salary you deserve as well. So we use some tools to unpick that, but that's a model that you could use to help you start to think about, from where you are now, where do you want to be? If I go on to I just wanted to bring this to life with Hannah's story. So Hannah was the lawyer who she trained as a lawyer, and when I first met her, she was a friend of a friend, and the way she presented herself was, look, I feel I've got lots of potential ahead. I can't figure out how my experience in the past will get me to where I want to be. I don't even know where I want to be. And by the way, I've got 2 children, and my 11-year-old is very needy. So we sat on Hampstead Heath, and we started working through the book, to be honest. Her background was she was a lawyer. She'd trained in South Africa and then had gone into commodities trading, and specifically gold trading. And at one point, she was a world expert in gold trading. She would commentate for Bloomberg and other people like that around what was happening in the gold market. Not great demand for that in the UK, but anyway, so that's what she'd done. That's her career trajectory. She moved to the UK, got married, after quite a long career actually, and she ended up working for a while for Tony Blair's Foundation for Africa. So that would have been back in the 90s, I guess. Then took a career break, and by the time I met her, she had got this 3-day-a-week charity role, and was sort of not floundering around thinking, what do I do? I can't go back to being a lawyer. I certainly can't go back to being a gold trader. Foundation for Africa doesn't work anymore. What am I going to do? So we had this blank sheet of paper, and we worked through some of the questions that I just put up there. And I'm compressing a long story here, but when she worked out what she loved, what her passion, what really mattered to her, because she was from Africa, making a difference to poverty in Africa was really important to her, as was having an impact on the lives of women and girls. What was she good at? We talked about her strength, her knowledge, her skills. She's very knowledgeable about the growth of African economies and how they're growing themselves, not necessarily with aid, but how aid can help with that, but the difference and the growth trajectories of different African economies. Very skilled in law, economics, and metals trading, so that had to be down there. We might have found a way to deploy that. But because she'd also worked for the Foundation for Africa and was working for this charity, she really understood how the not-for-profit sector works, and she was pretty well connected in the charitable space. What did the world need right now? The really practical solutions that build capability, don't just flood money at the problem. So it's not just about raising money for different charities, it's about applying them properly. And one of the we'll come on to networking in the past, but that being well connected in the charitable space turned out to be very useful, because once she got her brand sorted out and she was able then to go back to start to talk to people that she knew, she was able to unearth different opportunities that come up. And she is now a senior economic advisor to an international charity that works around the world and is all about promoting, improving the economic lives of women and girls. So that's an example of how and it sounds like it was all really straightforward. It took some time to unpick and develop and think about how she was going to use her connections to explore that opportunity. But I'm really delighted to say she got a fantastic job. So that's the first bit of our course, and the first thing I'd encourage you to do is really think about your brand and what it is you want to do and how can you add value, and how you're going to articulate that. The elevator pitch, the walking around, and the walking around the field pitch as well, which is the longer version of it, which we'll come on to because you have to get that on your CV. The second thing then is to, as I was talking about with Hannah, is mobilize your network. The reason this is really important is that my research showed that you are 5 times more likely to find your next role after a career break through your network than you are from a recruiter. Now, actually, this is true for anybody, whether you're coming back from a career break or not. Your network is so important. When I talk about how the recruitment market works, it will become clear why this is so important. Now, the problem we have as women is that we hate the term networking, because we think of networking as going into I'll show you what we think of networking. Come back. yeah, so let me just explain this. So the linking the brand and the networking piece is that if you think about it, your brand is the center circle. It's what you say about you. So Hannah said, this is about me, but then what you've got to then do with that is think about who are you going to say it to. So it would be no use Hannah taking her newly reformed brand and telling everybody in the school gates about it. Now, there might be some people at the school gates who could help, but there might not be. It's more about her thinking about who do I need to tell this. It's people that I'm working with in the charity sector, people I might know who are involved in Africa. Who does she go and say that brand to? Because then the grey circle, then those people go and talk about you to others, and that's what we call the golden circle, which is that's where your opportunities come from. And you strike gold when others can repeat 1 and 2. So you need to build your ambassadors. Just to give you a real example of this, I had somebody come to me quite recently. She got the most fantastic CV, data privacy lawyer, wanted to go back to data privacy. Thank you very much, that's really easy. And I said to her, how did you find out about us? And she said, oh, thinking, this will be one of the adverts I've placed, or it'll be something I've done on LinkedIn. And she said, oh, actually, it was 2 women that I know from the school gates mentioned you. And she told me their names, and I thought, well, I've never met those women in my life. So I had obviously done something or said something to someone who told somebody else, who then told this woman that they need to contact me in the Reignite Academy. So that's what I mean by getting into that golden circle. But you can only get that if you're clear about the white circle, which is what you're going to say about yourself. That's why it's really important to start thinking about strategically building your network, because what you're trying to do is build not your reputation, which is the y-axis, but your reach. You need more people to understand you and what you do and what you've got to offer. Which brings me on to the problem with networking. This is what we think about when we hear the word networking. And that isn't what I'm talking about. So I'm not talking about, hotel rooms with warm white wine and people handing out business cards. And anyway, that was all pre-COVID anyway. None of us can do that anymore. What I'm talking about is building your connections. And what we use is a very structured approach to help people think about the people they need in their network and where they've got some gaps. If you can find a sponsor, that's fantastic. And I have to say, Eleanor, I think you've been a sponsor of mine in many ways over the last few years, and that's been amazing. We don't get.
But I think that the thing about being somebody's sponsor, and Sylvia Hewlett, who invented the term, has been a great sponsor of mine, is that it's a reciprocal arrangement. So if you're, I've always thought you were brilliant, and so I've been delighted to work with you and to promote what you did. And so it's a reciprocal thing, isn't it? Kind of sponsors and protege. And then when you have that relationship, also then when you're in need. So when I set up Noon, and I thought, gosh, we need someone to talk to the women about careers, I knew exactly who I was going to call. So I think that the sponsor protege relationship is really based on it's a kind of mutual admiration society, isn't it? And also a kind of who do I know who can do this for me really well based on past experience. So
I think that's true of any role in the networking sphere, that it's not as much as it's not just what people can do for you, it's what you can do for them. And what we do is we help people think about who could be their sponsor, who could be mentors, and they might be people they've worked with before who've got the same technical skill set. Could be peers who are, who've worked alongside them. Connectors and thought leaders are interesting because they're people like, there's a lady called Vanessa Valerie who runs a network called We Are the City. You know her. When I first set up She's Back, and I had like 10 followers on LinkedIn, somebody I spoke to, who I didn't know that well, offered to connect me with Vanessa. Vanessa was tremendously connected into this whole world of women in the workplace. So she's what I would call a connector and thought leader. And she was able to give me like 20 different connections of people that I could go and talk to find out more about what I was trying to do. And as a person in my network, when I was getting going, she was fantastic. And then you've also got supporters, perhaps people who want to give you a chance to maybe do a project with them. But the point about this is being strategic and having a plan. And that's why in the course we get people to really focus on where are the gaps in the context of what their objectives are and where do they need to build and use their network. And I have to say, from the feedback I've had when I've done this course before, that has been one of the most powerful things, people realizing how many people they know who can help them that they just didn't realize were in that position to help. So it was like,
I totally agree. And I think that women are particularly bad at realizing how powerful their network can be. And I love your statistic about you're 5 times more likely to get a job from somebody that you already know. And I found that to be so true in setting up Noon as well. It's not just in terms of kind of getting a job. If you're also thinking of maybe setting up a business, it's completely about having the gumption and not being embarrassed to ring somebody up that you haven't talked to for a while and just ask their advice. And rather than thinking, oh, I can't possibly do that, I think it's worth putting yourself in the shoe if the boot was on the other foot. So if somebody called you who you used to work with, who you used to kind of go and have lunch with and you were quite friendly with, and they said, oh, I've been out for a few years and I'm thinking about doing that, of course you'd help them. And it's quite nice to talk to them and to see them. And what I find is the more you do that for other people, the more people do it for you. And Vanessa Valley is a great example of that, because she's incredibly generous with her network. And I try to be too, because I also think that whatever you do for other people, they'll be really appreciative and it will come back to you. And I don't do it because I think I'll get it back. I do it because
completely,
that's the way the world should work, but it does work.
There was a very practical example of that. Vanessa sent me a reminder. She'd asked me to do a quote for something and I'd just forgotten. And I was visiting my parents because my dad's not very well. And I saw this reminder from Vanessa saying, would you be able to do this? And I thought, right, I'll do it. So I just did it very quickly. The day after, I think she liked and shared something about this course. It was something really helpful about it. And she's got so many connections. I just thought, you know what? Thank you. I'm so glad. Similarly, I was trying to help somebody get a job recently, and we just couldn't. We tried. We really tried really hard, but we were very kind. We spent a lot of time with this, and I just never thought she would. I just didn't think. I couldn't see how she would get a job. We tried, but we kept giving her advice and being supportive and being, nudging her along and saying that sounds great. And then she emailed us a couple of weeks ago and said, "Oh, I've got a job. Fantastic! I've got a job working for the Law Society. Now, in my business, if I need a friend, Law Society is where I put one. Thank you very much." So but you can't, and that's it. Isn't why I was kind to her and why we tried to help. We just genuinely do try to help, but it does come back. And that's why I'd sort of reframe how you think about networking. It's not about the old boys network and selling and sharp elbows and handing out business cards. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is first asking, how can I help? How can I help you? Being interested in people, and they'll be interested in you back. It's been about supporting with your daily life. It's online and in real life. And I think online is so important, especially we're coming out of the pandemic, so hopefully we can see people in real life more, but one of the things that I've noticed is LinkedIn, and I'm a big fan, is that a lot of people, those mentors that you might want to connect with, who you haven't spoken to for 10 years, then it's easy to find because most of them will be on LinkedIn. And when you connect with them and you tell them what you're up to and you ask them for a bit of advice, they'll help. And it's a little and often, and it's just slowly but surely building up your network. And it can be about chilled wine if it's not warm white wine in hotel rooms. So yeah, it's a new definition: cultivation of productive relationships. So first of all, ask, how can I help? Don't keep score, but you've got to ping regularly. You can't sort of wait till you need something to phone somebody up. It's just about reaching out and growing your circle of contacts, and it makes life more fun that way. So that's the networking piece, which is really critical, and it's about starting to open up opportunities and build your support network. But you can't.
I'm just going to pop in here because there's a good question on the chat saying, is there hope for those of us who are not on LinkedIn or can't face it or aren't fans? So I knew you were going to say no, that LinkedIn is the absolute key.
Yes, of course there is. Of course there is. But you're missing a trick if you're missing an opportunity. I personally think. Yeah. Of course, you can do it without. but you better set up if you use it. Just use it to your advantage, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It's hard if you're looking for a job, and what I'm focused on is not just getting people ready to return to the workplace. I want them to get a job that pays them a salary, or at least freelance work that gets them income. So if you're trying to get work, it's very difficult to do that without a CV, and increasingly it's quite hard to do it without LinkedIn. Right, CVs. People get the wrong idea about CVs. They think they are potted autobiographies, and that is not their job. They're a marketing document which should be designed to get you an interview. That's all they are. There's something that you need somebody to read your CV and think, this person looks like they're suitable for this job, I must meet them. When the 6 seconds is all you've got, there was some research done in the US by a company called The Ladders a few years ago, and they put eye tracking software on recruiters to look at how long they read a CV for, and the average was 6 seconds, which to me is like incredibly low, which means that, going back to the brand piece, that what you write at the top has to be really compelling to make people read on. And it's all about thinking about how you're going to market yourself. In the course we go through some key principles, but just to try and pull out some of the key things that I would say about CVs. Your first place, that's the bad example, is bad because there's too much white space. You're not going to, too much space taken up with the name and address. So it's better to get some good information on, but it's not just about the amount of information. That the profile at the top has to sing out, I am perfect for this job. So whatever the job is that you're going for, you even give yourself that title. So if you're applying for head of marketing, call yourself head of marketing, and then put the description. Obviously not if you're a lawyer, but you've got it. The summary at the top has to be compelling and pull out, I can do this job. You then might have a key skills area, and then you go to your career history. Now, you've got to be strategic about this. If you've had a 6-year career break, it's absolutely fine to just put planned career break. If you didn't do anything in that career break that is relevant for the job you're applying for, don't bother explaining it. You don't feel like you need to take equivalent amount of space just because it lasted 6 years. Doesn't matter. Equally, what you don't want is your most interesting experience to be on page 2. So if you've worked in financial services, but it was a few years ago, don't feel like you have to do your most recent role at the top. You can do it the other way around. You can do it from the start of your career so that experience is on the front. Similarly, there's other tips and tricks. If you've done a lot of freelance work, let's say for 8 different organizations, and that's now going to start to take 8 paragraphs. If each one was, I don't know, a few months, just put them all together as various freelance contracts in the FMCG sector, and then describe what you did. So make it 1 paragraph. The key thing is just to get yourself thinking about this as a sales document. And I can share on this slide here some sites that are really good. myperfectcv.co.uk has got some fantastic templates, so I'd encourage you to have a look at that. But what I've called this slide is the perfect CVs, and that's because you should tailor your CV for every single job that you go for, unless every single job is the same. The more you can tailor to make sure that you're applying for the particular job and you're drawing out the skills that the recruiter is going to be looking for, the better. In terms of why CVs are rejected, spelling mistakes, saying I'd love to work for Marks and Spencer's when you're applying for Sainsbury's, you're surprised how many times that happens. But also, you need to be aware of how recruitment systems work. When you submit a CV, if you see a job advertised and you submit a CV, what happens is the CV goes onto a portal and is read by a computer, by an algorithm, and they will scan your CV to see if it's got the right keywords. If you put a table in or some fancy outline, sometimes the algorithms can't figure that out and it'll be rejected. If you haven't got the right keywords, it's going to be rejected, because the job of the algorithms are to filter the 100 CVs that get sent in down to say 20 that the recruiter's got to read. They're not going to read everything they get. So you've got to make sure that your CV is as aligned to the job as possible. And ideally, you need to get a person to hand it to another person, hence the networking piece, so you avoid these computer systems in the first place. It's also worth getting friends and colleagues to have a look at your CV for you. That's a good way if you want to get back in touch with someone and ask for some advice, and you can't really go and ask them for if they find you a job. What they probably can do is give you a bit of advice on how your CV could be updated and could be more relevant. What you also need.
So I'm just going to stop you. There's a good question on the chat saying, how do you tailor your CV if you basically haven't really got any relevant experience because you're going for a total career change?
Okay, if you're going for a total, say you are going for, I would think about the competencies. If you look on My Perfect CV, there's also a good website called interviewskills.co.uk. I think it's interview-, I'll find the link. It talks about competency interviews. You might not have the right technical skills, but if you think about some of the transferable skills you've got, say you've got, you've had to do a lot of negotiation or a lot of project management, I would find ways of pulling out some of the transferable skills that you've acquired in one role that you're taking over to another. But just a word on complete job change. And I will cover this a little bit when we come to the recruitment market. It's always easier to do a slight pivot than it is to do a complete leap. So if I go back to my climate change example, I'm working with a lawyer who, she was an EU competition lawyer, right? And she wants to work in climate change along with a million other people. So I was sort of saying to her, right, you need to be a bit strategic about this. If you want to work in climate change, let's think, why don't you think about, there are law firms now who are employing people as climate change managers, believe it or not. And they're also, they provide advice on climate change to their clients. Could you go back and could you take your 15 years legal experience and pivot from doing competition law to doing something around climate change within a law firm, which is an environment you're totally familiar with? They will respect you and they'll get you because they know what it takes to do what you've done. So that then you can then pivot from there, maybe in a few years' time, into more of a pure climate change role. Or the other alternative is to say, right, what are the various organisations that are working in the climate change arena? Are any of them looking for in-house counsels? Could you go and get an in-house role working as a lawyer for a climate change organisation as a way of pivoting into that sector? So that it's just worth thinking about, can you make one, rather than making a massive leap, can you make some small steps that start getting you in the right direction? But in any event, thinking about the skills and capabilities and competencies that role is going to be required and extracting what you've done in the past. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, now on to the dreaded LinkedIn. One of the reasons you have to be on it, I mean, it's up to you. You don't have to be on it. It's completely up to you. I think what happens is if somebody registers for one of my boot camps, first thing I do, I look them up on LinkedIn. Recruiters are the same. People, if you're going to be, if someone's going to interview you, they'll look you up on LinkedIn before they meet you. So, and if you're not on it, that's fine, but they'll wonder why. And I think you're missing a trick, because that's where all the recruiters go there, and the jobs are there, and your connections are there. So you're missing out on a whole network if you choose not to be on it. If you're going to be on it, give yourself a title which really showcases your specialty and value proposition. So what do I mean by that? You wouldn't just put teacher. You'd say what age children you teach and what your subject is. So make the summary compelling, interesting, and punchy. And that's also because recruiters and people who need to fill jobs, so not recruiters, but maybe owners of small growing businesses, they go on LinkedIn to search for people. So you need to have words in your title which will make you come up when people are searching for people looking for jobs. There's a obviously in this session I can't go into it in that much detail, but there is a toggle on LinkedIn that you can put on your profile to say that you're open for opportunities, and it puts a little green halo around you. Now, you can also change that toggle so that it's only visible by recruiters. So say you're in a job you absolutely hate and you want to move. You're not going to put the green toggle because your manager could see it. but so you can make yourself open for opportunities. It means that you're more likely to be found by people like me who might be looking for someone who can do this particular job. The other thing I absolutely love is, if you've never written a CV before, it's really daunting. What you can do is you can go, say you want to be a supply chain manager for AstraZeneca. Go on AstraZeneca's homepage, look at the jobs they're advertising, find the job description that they're advertising for the supply chain manager, and then use that as the basis of your CV. Now, I'm not saying make it up. If you haven't got the experience, don't make it up. But the way that people describe open job roles, it will show you what the key words are that you need to put on your CV. Also, another thing you could do is you could look at someone who maybe does the role you used to do that you want to do in the future. Check out their profile. And again, don't copy it if you haven't done that, but it's good, it gives you some ideas as to how you might describe yourself, what keywords to use, etc. So it's a fabulous resource for all of that sort of job hunting, the stuff that you need. Going back to the networking piece, I'll talk about why you need to be proactive in your job search, but it's a way of going out to find, say you really want to work for News International. You could go and find News International, find the key people, and you can start following people who work for News International. The thing about difference between following and connecting, if I want to, say I was on there and I didn't know Eleanor, but I was really interested, I knew she did a lot of writing about women in the workplace, and that's my field. What I could do is I could just go and follow her. That means that posts that she keeps, she posts would come up in my feed. So I would be following her on Noon, and I might like some of the things. I might, even if she's written an article that I think is particularly interesting, I might comment on it. Now, we're all human, and Eleanor, to correct me if I'm wrong, but if somebody makes a comment on an article you've written, do you check them out?
Yes, I do. And in fact, I have to say, in launching Noon, really being quite careful about looking at who's commented on posts or who's liked things that I've said about it, and then being quite strategic about reaching out to them has really, really helped. And certainly, yeah, I mean, it really works. And however, also I found that however grand the person seems on LinkedIn, most people actually check their own LinkedIn profiles. And if they've posted something, they're kind of, there's that dopamine hit of, oh, I posted it, does anyone like it? And no one's immune from that. Yeah. So you'd be amazed at who will get back in touch with you just because you like something on their thing. And I do that quite strategically now if I see someone in a similar space, because it's also a way to talk about Noon. So if they said something about women in midlife, I jump in going, oh, that's really interesting, and we're seeing loads of that in Noon, and maybe come along to Lisa Unwin's brilliant career thing. So I think you just need to be quite blatant about it, but it really works.
Yeah, if you notice somebody's liked a lot, and so I'm following you, you see me liking stuff, then when I reach out and ask for a connection, you're much more likely to accept, because I'm not some random. You've seen that I'm engaged with your stuff. So you can follow somebody first and then like them, and that's another way of starting to grow your network and grow your influence. And the other fabulous thing for somebody like me, who was, when I was starting She's Back, and I had no following and no profile and no way of getting any PR apart from you from time to time, nobody could stop me posting on LinkedIn. I could write my articles there without having to go through an editor or a PR agent. It's free and it's usable. So
I just say to that, I think it's really interesting how things have shifted. I mean, if somebody had said to me during my time at the Sunday Times that it would be possible to set up a whole new platform and get all the engagement that we've had from Noon and build the community that we've done in a year without chopping down any dead trees or putting things on newsprint and shipping it around the country, and with a really skeleton stuff, I would never believe them. But the power now of LinkedIn to make those connections, or for you to speak directly to the people you want to engage with, rather than it having to go through some kind of media middle person or PR or whatever, is really, really powerful. And I think a lot of women of our generation kind of don't realize it, and particularly if you've been out of the workplace for a while, I think it's one of the things that you can really do for yourself is really get in there on LinkedIn and make it your, and make it your thing. And you can really shift the dial. I could never have launched Noon without it.
No. I mean, I've got 14,000 followers now plus, and I paid nothing for PR. but it's been an effort, and I was trying to, you know, build a business sellable. You don't all need to aim for 14,000 followers, but it's the connections are there. Sorry, I'm going on and on. You can find people there, the people that you need to know, and you can show your achievements. We don't have time to cover that. Whoops.
Yeah, I was going to say, Lisa, there's some quite interesting questions on the chat, particularly around what the course will cover in terms of who it's going to be applicable to. And I've been saying that your experience in this is so wide ranging that I think pretty well anyone, kind of career gap, even if you're really clueless, that even if you really don't know what you want to do, whether you want to kind of, someone saying, do I want to volunteer, do I retrain? I think that working with Lisa, she will get you to ask the right questions, both around your purpose and then how to go about it from that point.
It used to be called, I first developed the course in lockdown, and I called it Future Proof Your Career. And the people that did it they were just at a crossroads thinking, I'm not sure. So there was one woman who'd been out for 14 years and was questioning what she wanted to do next. There was another who was working in HR and was thinking, do I go back into a fee-earning role in a law firm? There was somebody else who had a career in publishing and was now running a family firm and thinking, this isn't me for the next 20 years, what do I do? So it really doesn't matter. I think the point is that you could be at some sort of crossroads, thinking, do I return after a career break? Do I do a change? Do I move from A to B? Do I go freelance? Do I go from freelance to full-time? If you're just not sure, but you're thinking that you want to be somewhere different in 5 years' time, it's just about help. Okay, well, let's help you figure out what's that direction. Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And what are the steps you can take in the next 6 to 12 months that will get you on the path that gets you there? Does that make sense?
Lisa, the way that you've been talking is about, someone was saying here, the jobs Lisa was mentioning are very high levels, lawyers, gold traders, directors. She's saying, I've had a series of jobs rather than a career that I could re-enter or switch. I think the CV and LinkedIn information is useful, but I feel that I'm not of the level this talk is directed to. If I had to sum up my role, it would be administrator, which is so broad that it could cover mum's working part-time to office manager. Searching for administrator jobs brings up so many things, it's overwhelming. Will somebody like that benefit from your course?
Yeah, because you need to think about, okay, so one of the women that I worked with not too long ago she was a virtual PA. She wanted to be a real PA, actually. She wanted to stop being virtual and start being real. Well, that's right, but then she needed to think about, okay, well, what sort of, do I want to be a PA for an organisation like Barclays, which is massive and in the city, or would I rather be a PA for a small growing startup that's only got 10 people there? And then which sort of sector I'm going to, because you've got to start narrowing down and making a plan to how you're going to get that dream role. So I would say that, yes, because I do tend to use that language quite a lot, because they're the people that I work with, and particularly in Reignite. But the same principles apply for anybody, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think so. I was saying that I think that your skill in this has been so broad over the years that you've been running She's Back and Reignite Academy, that don't be put off by thinking that this has to be a very, kind of, you have to be a super high flyer in order to benefit from Lisa's advice, because I've seen her work with lots and lots of different people. And I think that the way that she gets you to think about what you want, where you want to go, what that might look like, is really helpful, kind of pretty well above the board. And I think, I do a lot of media training with very successful women, kind of CEOs and that kind of thing. And it's not just media training, it's about your personal, I call it personal narrativity, which is exactly what Lisa's saying, basically, about what is your brand. And it's all about what do you want people to be saying about you when you're not in the room. And I think that working out what that story is essential, whether you want to be an administrator or a kind of CEO or on the board of a FTSE company. It's all about working out what you've got to offer, what you stand for. And I think that doing that in a really structured, strategic, processed way, which is what Lisa does, will help anyone. Actually, it's really not just for the old lawyers.
No, and it's the same with, so I'm thinking about Nikki and how she got the job she wanted as a real PA. Again, it was through her network. So we made a plan about who did she know that knew people in the sort of sector that she wanted to work in, who were building businesses, who might need that sort of support, and who could make the right introductions. Because the final piece that I was going to talk about now is how to find the right role. And the recruitment market is a market. That's what people don't realize. It's where the best people are competing for jobs, and jobs are competing for people. And if you start applying for job ads, you're already behind the curve. Because if somebody is looking, say I've got a tech startup in Shoreditch who's looking for somebody to help with marketing, which they were not too long ago. The last thing they want to do is post an advert, because that's going to cost them. The first thing they're going to do is ask people they know, do they know somebody who'd like to do a marketing role for 2 or 3 days a week based in Shoreditch? So that people use their existing contacts, first of all, to find people, and then they use networking. And the last thing they will do is go to the top of the pyramid and post an advert, which is why when you're thinking about getting yourself a role, you need to be thinking about, how do I get to the bottom of that pyramid? How do I create a plan that is going to help me find the ideal job? Which is, again, about it's what we'd call proactive job searching. So the reactive job searching is applying for roles that have been advertised, and there you're going to be dealing with the algorithms. What we encourage people to do is the proactive job searching, which is setting some real targets and goals. And my colleague who ran a recruitment desk for ages, she would talk about how many calls she would be expected to do as a recruiter to help her candidates find a job. And we'd say, you need to do that as well. So you need to be thinking about who do you need to be calling, what meetings do you need to have, who do you need to be going and having a coffee with, what's the plan, what research are you going to do, how are you going to refine that elevator pitch, so that ultimately you will get your CV in front of the right people who will have you meet you for a coffee or get you that interview that ultimately gets to the job. Because there's a funnel that goes from where you are now to actually finding and getting the right job offer. We also touch a little bit on interviews and how to be successful at interviews, which include how to deal with competency-based questions, but also what do you say about the career break. And whilst I said that when it comes to the CV, not to dwell on your career break too much, unless you've been doing something that's relevant for the job, I think interviews are a great time to talk about it, because then you can say, I'm refreshed, I'm ready to go, I'm really keen, I'm adaptable. The thing you've got going for you, if you are on a career break, compared to anybody else who's going for this job probably, is that you're available now, provided you make sure you are available now. Everybody else is on a 3-month notice period. And right now, the recruitment market is really, really hot. So people that are available now and clearly motivated and have got the right skills and experience are in a really good position. So it's also, a chance to say that you've acquired lots of other skills and experience as well. So we encourage that. And we also often we get asked about questions like, well, how do I get over the fact that I can only work in term times? Or how do I explain that I can only work 3.5 days a week? Or how do I make sure that they'll let me leave at 3 o'clock on a Friday because I've got X, Y, Z to do? And the first thing we always say about that is, you've got to be the shoe that fits. Don't begin with your limitations. So what I mean by this, everyone's completely puzzled. What I mean is, imagine you're going to a wedding or some really important event, and you need a pair of shoes. You need a pair of red shoes. And you go into a shop and you try these pair of red shoes on, and they are absolutely perfect. And then you look at the price on the bottom and it's not perfect. It's a bit more than you wanted to pay. By now you've fallen in love with the shoes. You're not going to leave those shoes in the shop. You're going to buy those shoes. You've got to be the shoe that fits. If you're the right person for the job, an employer is somebody with a problem. If you're the solution to their problem, they will then happily negotiate the hours you want to work, the salary you need, the benefits you need, the flexibility you need, etc. But you've got to start being the shoe that fits. So that's it.
Now, I love that. Somebody here saying, is late 50s too old? Is there an age limit on this? My immediate answer is to say, absolutely not. We're all going to live till, likely till we're 90 or 100, and we've still got so much more to come. But what's your answer on that? Well,
I'm 56, and so if you're telling me that late 50s is too late, then no, of course it isn't.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then another woman is saying, Claire is saying, can you suggest companies or recruiters that support older women who aren't in financial services or law? There seems to be quite a lot of returners programs for these professions. I'm 54, had to step out of my career to look after my parents. and so she's not a banker or a lawyer. Are there other places? I mean, it's a bit difficult, isn't it?
There's a company called Inclusivity that's run by a woman, Steph Dillon, who helped me set up Reignite Academy, and she covers all sorts of sectors. She does a lot of work. She does a lot of work in insurance. She's worked in. She worked for. She did some work for Shell. But don't assume you have to find a returners program. You're just because you're returning from a career break, it doesn't have to be a return program. I think there is a lot of ageism around, but you will find, but there's also a lot of demand around it. It's bearing what's happening in Ukraine. It's actually, it's the economy is really busy at the moment. So I'd take heart from that and be the shoe that fits. Get yourself, be the solution to somebody's problem. I actually had a client the other day say, we need an older person for this role because it involves assessment of risk, and somebody in their 20s won't understand. They'll look on the bright side of everything. We need somebody who's been through the recessions of the last 20-30 years.
Yeah, I heard that the other day. Actually, I just did an interview with the head of all talent at NatWest and their head of diversity and inclusion, and they were saying they've got a real problem with risk directors, finding people who can assess risk, because all companies need them, and all the experienced women get kind of snapped up by other people, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah. So that and I've just written a piece for the FT, which is all about why companies need to hang on to these midlife women and the qualities that we bring, being a grown up, having all that life experience. Yeah. And that there's a really interesting research from Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In Foundation on how they've actually kind of categorized it. So senior women are 70% more likely to to mentor younger, particularly people of colour within the organisation, or other diverse folks, because a lot of older women understand what it's like to be the only person in the room. So there's all that kind of life skills, which is a real addition. So I'm really trying to make the point about why companies need to hire us back in.
The other question I often get asked is about technology, and how difficult it is if you've been out and so technology has moved on. The one thing I'd say about the technology side is that any technology that's not easy to use fails. So the technologies that win are ones that are easy to use, so they're dead easy to learn. And companies are a lot better now than they used to be at teaching people to use the tech. So I definitely wouldn't let tech.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because I think a lot of people are quite scared of it. But actually, having been a complete tech idiot when I left the Sunday Times, because I was so senior that I'd had endless people to do. I just said, "Oh, can you do this for me?" And someone from tech support would come running over. And now I have to do it all. And the first time I ever did an IGTV on my own, I was kind of weeping on the stairs, and my 16-year-old had to come and show me how to do it, kind of going, "Mum, you're such an idiot." But now, you get better at it. All you need is someone to show you once, and it gets a lot better. What I think is interesting, what I'd really like to stress about this is that Lisa's course will not only give you access to the amazing Lisa, but also to the incredible other Noon women who are part of this community. And everything that we do at Noon is about building communities. And when women on our retreats, they all become firm friends and they all stay in touch. On our dating course, there's a really active WhatsApp group where all the women are encouraging each other. And it'll be the same on Lisa's course, that you don't just get access to her, you'll also get access to a whole load of other women in the same position who are all going through the same things, and you can all mentor and support and kind of advise each other and put Lisa's principles into practice. So this is also part of what we call at Noon finding a new tribe who will help you in your search for your next phase, because we all need a new tribe to move into a new chapter.
The other thing I should probably just talk about is that on each module, I've done a lot of reading over the years. I've got this pile of books here, for example, but this one is the 100-Year Life, is the one that is really good at sort of talking, but it's not on there, but it talks about how this job for life doesn't apply to anybody anymore, and we've all got to learn and adapt. But with each module, there'll be some pre-work, and then people like to take in information differently. So usually after any module, I'll say, you might want to read this article, or listen to this podcast, or watch this YouTube video, which just sort of amplifies some of the messages, because they're not all my messages. It's come from lots of other people's work in this whole area, and then there'll be homework, in which we like to do. I often sometimes get people in pairs to share their experience. It's nice to do as a pair actually, but I'll do a one-to-one session with everyone because everyone's typically in very different situation. We're going to set up a private Facebook group so that people can talk about the challenges that they're having, or ask people any questions, give people each other ideas as well. That's been effective in the past.
Yeah, and I think also what often ends up happening is that they'll create a new network for you. I mean, it's amazing. The women who came on our first Noon retreat in October have really got so involved. They've really helped each other, and this is all about kind of building a network out and a supportive tribe. But also, you never know who'll be on the call. They're a pretty high-powered bunch, our Noon ladies. I'm always so impressed by you all.
Just to give you a flavour of what and whether you do the course or not, this is if you're thinking, what do I do next? A really interesting exercise is this. Ask yourself, if you look back over your life and career to date, and just think about what are the 5 decisions or events that have led you to being where you are today. It's quite an interesting one when you look back and think, oh, I did that. This was the course of the trek to go, and because then there's a really good position to start thinking, okay, some of those I consciously made, some of those happened to me. Now I'm looking at the next 10, 15 years. What am I actively going to do now to shape the next 10, 15 years? So it's quite an interesting thing to do. And if you were doing the course, I would be asking people to do that and share it. How to find me and others. My email's there. I expect all of you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm looking forward to having those requests. Obviously, Noon, Reignite Academy is just for Lois. And I did put up that there, Steph's organisation, Inclusivity, because I know that I talk about Lois a lot. Stephanie does work across a whole host of sectors and has worked with people at all sorts of different levels. So she's a good resource.
Excellent. So, I mean, I hope it's been, the messages on this are fantastic. People seem to have really liked it. I can personally vouch for Lisa's incredible powers at this. She's definitely looked at my CV on the odd occasion and given me invaluable advice during my setting up of Noon. And what I think was also interesting on this is how many women who are saying, how would I go about setting up my own venture? So I think that's something, somebody got in touch with me yesterday actually on LinkedIn, saying, would we be interested in running something around becoming an entrepreneur in your 50s? And I think we should absolutely definitely do that. But I would really encourage you, whatever stage you're at, whatever you think you're going back into this, really really sign up for Lisa's course, because I think that I think it'll really help. We'll send you a copy of this video because I know that there's a huge amount of information in here that you might want to take in at a slightly slower pace, and do look at Lisa's course, which is going to be starting in a couple of weeks. And I really hope that you'll all kind of sign up. As part of the course, you'll get put on a group so you can create a community, and do come and check us out at Noon. And then the other thing, which I really hope Lisa's going to be part of later in the year, is our Noon reboot retreats. Because you were going to come last time, weren't you, Lisa? And then at the last minute you had a family funeral and couldn't come. Because so one of the other things that we do on the reboot retreats is a kind of version of this, and talking to people about their own story and what they want to do next and all of those kinds of things. So that's very much kind of looking at yourself in the round. We reckon it's the best treat you could give yourself. So do sign up for Lisa's course. Thanks very much for joining us today. Thank you for lovely Jen, who's our brilliant COO, who's been running the tech. And we will send you an email from Noon and Lisa in the next day or so with a copy of this video. Do share it with someone else who you think might be find it helpful, and sign up for the course. And we hope we'll see you at Noon soon.